Thank you. Please be seated. Thank you. Well.
So what's the difference between Obama's face and his asshole? Well, when the same thing comes out of both ends, who can tell? As we have seen since the day Barack Obama was inaugurated president, virtually all of his policies have been a catastrophe, if not evil. Let's recap that very quickly. As LaRouche correctly forecast in July 2007, the entire world system accelerated into a complete state of disintegration. There, he proposed measures which would lead to the creation of a credit system, the only solution to this crisis. With this being the phase the world has come into, look at the actions taken by our current president. His stimulus bill, signed into law shortly after his inauguration, has only resulted in over 2 million job losses for American citizens, out of the 3 million which became unemployed from the beginning of his presidency. And in the recent weeks, virtually every state within the country could not come up with a state budget that does not include deep cuts into programs for the defenseless and poor. California is a very explicit example, with Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger proclaiming that he would be more than happy to cut off your grandmother's legs by unmercifully slashing the healthcare budget, which is how he and Barack Obama hold a mutual love. Other states, such as Ohio, out of desperation to keep their state above waters, are forced to place slot machines in horse track races as a means to generate revenue. These circumstances can only be expected by the president's willful incompetence, and given that he is a modern-day Nero, you can't expect him to view reality or to recognize that he can possibly make mistakes. Members of his administration, such as Vice President Joe Biden, have even come out saying that the administration has misread the economy in drawing up its stimulus package since it was worse than they expected. Across the Atlantic from Moscow, we heard the screams of Obama like a 5-year-old boy who can't get what he wants in Toys R Us. No, 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 he said. We did not misread the economy. We had incomplete information. After much pouting, the president went on to say that there was nothing different he would have done, and added that his program has been the largest economic success in American history. What a fool. Now, because there is no way to cover up his failure, his own motives and manner of speech have become the device of his self-destruction. Recent polls have shown that a good and growing percentage of the American population hate his economic policies, while in places like Ohio, Barack Obama's popularity took a sharp drop, and not to mention on an international scale, such as his recent trip to Moscow, demonstrates that nobody likes the guy. As a matter of fact, Lyndon LaRouche is much more popular amongst Russian press. So what does this all mean? It means that many people around you have taken a closer step to being human by rejecting the British Empire's orchestrated policies of the current president. But the important question to ask is, what do we do now? Because the threat right now is not that we are just losing jobs and that faster, or we are simply losing our benefits. Those things are important. But in all reality, the planet as a whole is plunging into a new dark age of the type not seen since the 14th century European Dark Age, which rapidly reduced the population density by 1/3. We are talking about a living hell which humanity will not come out of for decades, or until sometime in the distant future, a minority grouping succeeds in establishing policies that are in the tradition of Lyndon LaRouche's policies and all of his influences. Our population levels will drop from that of the current 6.5 billion people to less than 2 billion by a combination of disease, war, famine, and other unpredictable causes of death. That will be our world if we don't fight to revolutionize our notions of economics and fight to implement what LaRouche has proposed as a Hamiltonian international credit system and do away with the current British monetarist system. Although we all would probably not immediately fully come to understand this idea the way LaRouche does, because you are human, you can begin to strive for an understanding of that concept, which is what LaRouche intended with his recent documents, Economic Science in Short, and its just released sequel, The Rule of Natural Law. In his The Rule of Natural Law, he points out that the lawful mechanism for bringing this much-needed rescue action about is the same principle of natural law adopted by the U.S. federal Constitution. The authority for determining credit, prices, and guaranteed national credit for physical economic development must come from relevant principles of natural law. He states further that the implementation of such a rescue of the nations must be crafted on the foundation of the notion of a physical economy rather than a monetary system. This, he says, must be based on a notion of natural law which expels monetarism. As stated in our U.S. Federal Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, only the nation has the power to issue credit for its own development. The debt that is incurred is a sovereign debt of the nation-state, and as a matter of fact, being indebted to any foreign entities operating above the interests of the state is constitutionally illegal. These illegal actions that operate against the general welfare is what we call monetarism, the empire. Now, looking back at this notion of natural law, which LaRouche has stressed, we find that this concept had lingered for centuries within a minority class of thinkers whose devotion to spreading the concept was not in vain, because with the founding of America, that principle was finally realized. To give you a sense of this, we turn to the founder of modern physical science, Cardinal Nicholas Acusa, who was not only the greatest thinker of the 15th century, but as documented by a succession of his writings, willed that a nation must be founded outside the parameters of Europe, seeing that Europe then, as it is now, was too degenerate to allow any form of systematic human progress to occur. While organizing for the unification of the Western and Eastern churches, which succeeded in the 1439 Council of Florence, paving the way for the emergence of the famous Italian Renaissance, Cusa wrote,
"Therefore, since all are by nature free, every governance, whether it consists in a written law or in a living law in the person of a prince, can only come from the agreement and consent of the people. For if men are by nature equal in power and equally free, the true properly ordered authority of one common ruler, who is their equal in power, can only be constituted by the election and consent of the people."
That's right. The concept of human equality, which we find in America's Declaration of Independence, had long before been conceived. But does this notion of equality also mean that we are equal to animals? Of course not, you dork. We are looking at natural law, and what is natural about the human species is the fact that God had created man in his living image. That is, the composer of the universe destined men and women alike to partake in an intimate process of creation. That is why we can create things that never existed before. That is why we can willfully increase our population density through the application of new inventions that increase the productive powers of labor and increase the living standards of society. These inherent qualities are indeed identified within our Declaration of Independence, and on this topic, Cusa himself would write,
"From the beginning, men have been endowed with reason, which distinguishes them from animals. They know, because of the existence of their reason, that association and sharing are most useful, indeed necessary, for their self-preservation and to achieve the purpose of human existence. Human beings have built cities and adopted laws and governments, and they establish guardians of these laws with the power necessary to provide for the general welfare."
Thus, as LaRouche says, this understanding of natural law expels monetarism in favor of the general welfare. Ultimately, if you are seeking a solution to get civilization out of this crisis, you'll have to join our fight to eliminate the monetary system of the empire. That monetary system, which has received trillions of U.S. taxpayers' money in bailouts, only to continue its march of death against our people. As LaRouche has repeatedly stated, we must establish in its stead a credit system as the powers are given to us by our Constitution, and as Nicholas Acusa, in a certain sense, had willed. We must extend that system by initiating a cooperative agreement between the United States, Russia, China, and India to bring about a new system, a fixed exchange rate system that would allow sovereign republics to issue long-term, low-interest rate credit directed towards infrastructure projects such as dams, hospitals, maglev trains, and educational facilities. All this could be accomplished by simply placing the current international financial system under bankruptcy reorganization, while canceling all debt obligations generated by hedge funds and derivatives.